today you're going to learn about ancient India, really ancient India though. We're going to look at the Indus Valley Civilization, Aryan Migration, and settlements. At the end I'm going to include a little bit of information that predates Ahsoka. That way you have kind of where he came from. You were supposed to get this last week, but vocal issues, technology issues didn't happen, so we have it now. Let's begin. You're going to write down the things I underline. If you like to write down more, you can, but I need you to at least have the things I underline down. So we're going to start with the Indus Valley Civilization. Don't forget, you can always pause when you need to. About 5,000 years ago, nomads in India formed around the Indus River Valley. This is going to be similar to the Nile River, the Mesopotamian rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates. This is the third river that we see settlements around. The soil was rich, similar to that of the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates, and farmers were able to grow large crops of wheat, barley, and beans. Just as in Mesopotamia, the rise of crops meant the rise of specialization, and people began working in other jobs. In other words, we are not all farmers. Remember, specialization means that people can do other jobs. They can become artists, they can become teachers, they can become politicians, they could become tradesmen, they can craft, they can go into war. Specialization is key because of the crops. So here you have an image of the actual Indus River Valley civilization, and you have little houses that appear all over. Next we have Mohenjodaro and Harappa. Now, the Indus River Valley civilization flourished between 2600 BC and 1900 BC. Two of these major cities, which still have remains today, are Mohenjodaro and Harappa. At their peak, they had 35,000 residents. That's three times the that's three times the size of Conway, the community of Conway. That's a lot of people for back then. In addition, the cities back then had a lot of streets. Larger streets were actually paved, which is kind of cool. We think of the streets back then being all dirt and rustic. They actually did have brick paved streets. More about Mohenjodaro and Harappa. They had a lot of the streets, as I said, were made with bricks. West of the city stood a fortress. A lot of the houses that were brick had wooden roofs and were several stories tall. The residents also had well water, and every house had at least one indoor bathroom. They also had garbage chutes with allowing garbage to be thrown into bins for collection. This is huge. A lot of civilizations after this didn't have this concept of having a garbage chute. And those of you who are not familiar with that idea, that's where you put your garbage down a little hole in the wall and it goes into a big bin and gets taken away. A lot of civilizations, including a lot of European civilizations, would just throw their garbage out on the street, and if you hit someone, well, tough for them. You would have just the accumulation of garbage, meaning more disease, and that wasn't healthy. The people in Mohenjodaro and Harappa actually had garbage chutes and had some kind of management system for this. But how do we know all of this? We've seen the European areas, we've seen diaries of people, but how do we know things that happened 3, 4, 5,000 years ago? We have archaeologists. Yes, that is a dog in an Indiana Jones outfit, and yes, Indiana Jones is the best archaeologist, anthropologist out there, just in case you're wondering. Here's one of the ruins, and you can see that there are areas, there's a courtyard, you have a wall outside, you have the bricks, and you can almost imagine this actually being a real place. Well, I mean, it is a real place. You can imagine people actually living here. Now, life in Mohenjodaro and Harappa. We know a good amount of life because the ruins left a lot of clues. We have royal palaces, temples, shops, and jewelry which tell about daily life. You can see jewelry from shells, ivory that's from elephant tusks, and gold. You have ruins of old shops. You have information from the shops, who sold what kind of things are brought in that day, what did they spend. You also have temples, which show areas of worship. If you remember in the grapes, a lot of the art we have back then is religious art because that was created in stone. It's more permanent. Moving on, we have the Aryan Migration. In 1900 BC, the people left the Indus Valley. They just got up and left. Reasons we believe that happened were drought, earthquakes, floods, and northern invaders. And, there should be a little picture of an earthquake house, and people running away from it, but apparently that didn't happen there. Well, there you go. There's ruins of a house. You also have the Aryans were Indo-Europeans. That means they come from Asia and around Europe. So between the two, Indo-Europeans. And that's something you should probably know. They raised cattle for meat, milk, and butter, which was a huge taboo in the area at the time. By 1500 to 1000 BC, they moved throughout India, and they made a new culture with the remaining Indus Valley people. Over time, everyone eventually then settled down. The Aryans started seeing the cattle as sacred, which was a belief in the Indus Valley, and cattle were no longer used for food. There were no more meat, no more beef. Over time, the Ganges River became used in addition to the Indus Valley, so we have another river being in play here. Something you need to know about the Ganges River. It was seen as sacred. Also with healing properties. This right here is a test hint. Test hint. See, aren't you glad you're watching this? Test hint, Ganges River. Ganges River right there. Sacred. Test hint. Also, you need to know that the Aryans lived in tribes. And remember, this is a family unit. We talked about how in other areas you had the clan, the tribes, the nuclear family. The tribes is a family unit, and each were led by a Raja, which is a prince. So moving on to the Maurya Empire, we're almost done, and Shonda Gupta. So before the empire, and going back to the Raja theme, India was made of several warring states, and each state was ruled by a different king. See, if all these guys here, we rule. Now, there's a problem when you have a bunch of rulers. They all have different ideas of how to do things, and that's kind of an issue. Can you imagine if we had a different ruler for each subsection of Orlando, and then all tried to do something as one piece? Wouldn't work very well. So you have Shonda Gupta, and he's going to change things. He was born to a poor family, sold into slavery, but eventually became king and led a very glamorous life. He was even sometimes seen as riding on a gold chair carried by his servants, and other times as an elephant, on an elephant covered in jewels. He was never seen as an elephant, please disregard that. Here's a gold chair that is not his gold chair, that is just there to kind of show you what it looks like. Here's what we think he looks like from artist interpretation of scripts from back then, of royal paintings. Those are large earrings, those are not gauges, just in case you're wondering. So Chandragupta's rule. One of his friends gave him a book called, I'm going to mispronounce this, Arthashastra, and that was a book on absolute rule. And this book said to establish an army of spies to inform on your citizens. So he made a huge army of 9,000 elephants. See, 9,000 elephants, people on these elephants in the army. He had the army spying on his citizens. He was so afraid of assassins because people really didn't like they were being spied on. They actually slept in a different room every night. No, he didn't have millions of rooms. He just didn't spend the same night in two in a row. He also had somebody else test his food, which is a job I would love to have. Probably really good food. He was a harsh ruler, but he was seen as very fair. He used his wealth to improve the empire, and by that he created irrigation in the area. He did not invent irrigation, he made sure there was irrigation. He cleared the forests, allowing people land to farm on. He promoted crafts and mining so that there were more jewels and more goods to trade other people, and created a network of roads. This ended up bringing order and peace to India. So now we go to Ashoka. He is Shonda Gupta's grandson. And we will not be spending the next few days learning about him. That was your DBQ, which will come up. Hint. Test. So there you have it. In 11 minutes. I know it's a little long, but it's a lot of information. Thank you for bearing with me, and I'll see you in class. Don't forget, you need to be able to comment on this on Edmodo, so make sure you go back to the Edmodo page and add your comments there. Thank you.